My guest in the Nimataion today is Oberon Zell, and together we are spinning a yarn. Oberon, you're a legend. You're a wizard in the truest sense of the word. You're the founding father of paganism, neo-pagans, the headmaster of the Great School of Wizardry. I think it's better you introduce yourself. You're wearing so many hats.
Well, it's difficult for me to introduce myself just because of that, but I am the founder of the Church of All Worlds, which was the first pagan organization identified as pagan to become legally incorporated, and therefore the first able to legally ordain priestesses since forever. So that was a big deal. I was the first person to claim the identity of pagan for myself, my church, and religion, and therefore instrumental, I think, in founding the entire pagan movement, which is vast today, just vast, regarded as the fastest growing religion in most of the Western world, and huge all the time. I'm quite delighted because it's a wonderful community, and it's diverse and populous and has the right idea, and it's connected all with the ancient ways, the ancient nature things. And the story I'll tell is how that all began for me, I guess. But I founded the Great School of Wizardry, which is not religious. It's a secular school of magical studies. And I recently passed on the mantle of headmaster to my protege, Miss Nicholas Kingsley, who is carrying it forward. And I'm very pleased to be able to do that, to raise up a new generation and pass the torch. We had a wonderful ceremony about that. Publisher of Green Egg magazine, the longest running magical publication ever. Started in 1968. Now it's online. The current issue is number 182, so that's a going thing. Used to raise unicorns back in the 80s. Had a diving expedition to the South Pacific in search of mermaids. And of course, polyamory. My beloved life mate, Morning Glory, who died nearly 9 years ago after 40 incredible years together, is credited with coining the terminology of polyamory, polyamorous, all that. So that was a huge thing. And again, founded a new movement that people were able to carry forward with an identity. And I think in both of those cases, pagan and polyamorous, to be able to have an identity by which people can feel, I'm not alone, there's others like me, was a huge thing and very important to us because we grew up alone in changelings, children's, ugly ducklings like that. So that's just some of it. There's a lot, but there you go.
And of course, you've written numerous books, and
yes,
you're an artist, and so on and so on. But
on and on. Yes, true. All of that. Yes. Well,
yeah.
I've been a busy boy. I was the one who first came up with the concept of Gaia, the living Earth, that the entire biosphere of the Earth is a single vast living organism. And that got picked up and popularized by other people as well. But I was the first person to articulate that concept, that paradigm. Really, it's not just a theory; it's just a way of looking at life.
So, in all your experiences, this many lives you've lived in this one life, I wonder what has been your favorite story as a child.
Well, I think I would have to say that what began the whole thing for me, what set me on the path, was when I was a very small child. I was, of course, very precocious in learning to read at a very early age, and somewhere right at the very beginning, my parents got a set of books called the Childcraft books, and it was kind of an encyclopedic bunch of books for kids on different topics, and there was, geography and science and nature, and one of the books was about mythology of the world, with myths and legends of all lands and peoples. And while I loved all the books and read them avidly, the first one that struck my attention and really put me on the path was a tale of for children, a children's version of the story of Hades and Persephone, the foundation of the Eleusinian mysteries. It was told through not through the Greek version, but through the Roman version, from Ovid's Metamorphoses, which is what popularized so many of the Greek myths, but they used the Roman names. So it was Proserpina and Pluto, Pluto and Proserpina, the story.
Mm-hmm.
And they had them being children in the story. And it's a little hard to imagine considering that it's a very adult themed story of, the Lord of the Underworld, claiming a bride and taking the goddess of springtime and flowers into the underworld to be his bride against her will, but then she becomes the queen of the underworld, and through her, life is able to be reborn, from year to year. It's in the mysteries of the ancient world based on that. Well, that book had a huge impact on me because it introduced me not only to Greek mythology, which eventually expanded into all other mythology, Egyptian and Roman and Sumerian and Celtic and Hindu, and it just kept on going on and on. Norse, I mean, there's no limit to how many different cultures have wonderful stories. But this was the beginning, but it also introduced me to the idea of multiple gods and goddesses, By the time I was old enough to get sent off to Sunday school, which was obviously much later, I had already assimilated the concept of gods and goddesses of many cultures and many peoples. So to me, the presentation in Sunday school of the Jewish story of the Old Testament, of the creation and all the rest of it, and the Christian version of the New Testament, all that stuff, that to me was just one more mythology that wasn't mine. I mean, I wasn't Greek and I wasn't Egyptian. I wasn't a lot of that stuff. And I wasn't Jewish either. So learning all these stories, they were always the stories of other interesting people, but I never took them as the one true, right, and only way. And that, I think, had a profound influence on me later on as I came to get to the point in my life where I started looking around much, much later and questioning for what kind of a religion would be suitable for me. Where could I go and feel at home? And well, there wasn't anything quite right exactly, so I ended up having to create one, but that's another whole story. But in the process of doing so, I drew from the customs, the mythology, the creation myths, the legends, all of this stuff from many, many different cultures. So when we founded the Church of All Worlds, it was completely inclusive. Everybody's welcome, and we love the traditions and the stories and the customs of everybody. We celebrate all the holidays, and all the festivals and honor all the stuff because it's so rich. The idea of somehow limiting ourselves to only one tiny little thing, especially a monotheistic vision that only has one deity and a male deity at that, just seemed totally limiting and no real reason to do that. There was so much more. And I found it interesting then, and I don't know how it is today in school because I'm way beyond that, obviously. But in grade school and in public school, they also introduced us to mythology. There were books that were part of the studies on Greek mythology, Robert Graves and and other people, and this was part of our education, And then we learned myths and legends, and we saw movies like Hercules and Jason and the Argonauts, and
Wonderful, yeah.
all these wonderful, wonderful stories that were dramatized and brought to life in our time, just the way once upon a time the storytellers sat around the campfire, much like we're doing now, and told the stories. And we continue telling them, and we making up new stories. This is where science fiction and fantasy come in, new myths and legends. Something like Avatar, for example, takes us. There's a new myth and legend for our time and people, but they're also rooted in the ancient archetypes. The wizards and the heroes and the quest, and all of this kind of stuff, and the travels and journeys and the discoveries and the company of different people who come and join the company. It's all interwoven into this.
Yes.
And this is such a rich cultural mythos that I never really could see the point of limiting oneself to just one tiny little fragment of all the possibilities when there is so much more to draw from. And it's not just that we draw from the stories and they inspire us, which they do. They provide us the metaphors. They provide us the references, that we have common references. Everybody knows the story. When we refer to, say, Hercules, everybody knows who that is. You can talk about it, or Robin Hood or King Arthur or any of them. I mean, we all know who they are and we all know the stories. But more than that, we are storytellers. And the second magic, See, the first magic we ever discovered that set us on the path to becoming human was fire. We learned to create fire, and that immediately set us apart from all the rest of the animal kingdom for the billion years of evolution. We suddenly were different. We had fire. And the next magic was storytelling. We sat around the fire in the evening and we told the stories. Oh, what did you do today? Oh, well, Hog and I went out and we, got a bunch of the guys together and we, killed a mammoth, and did this whole thing. And the people will get up and enact the story. And somebody else starts, beating on a log, and somebody picks up some stones to give a little rhythm and you start kind of dancing and you kind of weave it out there. And before long, you've got the foundation of theater, you've got the foundation of religion, all coming around, sitting around the campfire, telling the stories.
Yeah.
So we are shaped by the stories, and we are the storytellers, the story makers. We shape the world by the stories we tell, and the whole world is stories. That's what it all is.
Stories are the building blocks of reality.
Exactly.
And as I perceive them, they are living beings, and they use us to procreate.
Yes, I love it.
Yes, several of those stories are thousands, tens of thousands of years old.
Yes,
they have survived through us, like we are doing now. Yeah, we and I love.
But we're not just passive. The wonderful thing is that we today can shape the world that we envision by telling new stories.
Yes.
And putting them out, So
yeah,
it's not just a matter of passively receiving them. It's a matter of using them to go forward and create as well. This is an incredible magic. It shapes the world. And this is also our only true immortality. Our individual lives, come and go and pass away unless they're remembered in the stories. And if we live a really great life, it becomes to retold in stories. The way we tell the stories of Robin Hood, King Arthur, Jason, these people will never be forgotten. The stories will keep being told. So I set out early in my life to say, well, I've got to live a life that's interesting enough to make a really good story that people will want to tell and remember me down the centuries. So that's been what I've been doing.
I think you're accomplishing it very well.
Well, thank you, Bernard.
Oberon, thank you so much for this inspiring talk and for this insight in how one story blossomed into this very productive and magical life of yours. Thank you so much.
Well,
I'm looking forward to talk with you again, and have a great time until then.
Thank you. You too. Blessed be.
Bye.
All right.
The world is magical.